Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this new webinar on analyzing a Windows kernel crash with time travel analysis. I am Guillaume Villecoq and I'm pleased to have Pierre Mondon with me. He will walk you through another journey where he exploited time travel analysis, this time in a Windows use case.
Before we get into the actual kernel crash itself, let me give a bit of context on what is time travel analysis. The idea is record every single hardware context at every single instruction executed. So that means all the memory changes and all the CPU states. Traditionally, it required full system emulation, so both user land and kernel land. And more importantly, that allows you to answer these tough questions when you are debugging what happened 50 instructions ago, who wrote this in the memory, and etc. So with esReverse, you've got two options when it comes to time travel analysis. You have the full system emulation, big elephant, that relies on full system emulation, whether it's Linux, Android, or Windows. There are advantages as well as disadvantages. An advantage being you have a full system emulation with both the kernel and user land. The disadvantage, depending on the situation, is that you have both the kernel and user land. It's quite costly in hardware resources to generate a trace. It's quite time consuming as well. But on the counterpart, you have absolutely everything at hand that happened within that full system emulation. Its cousin, the small elephant, has both advantages and disadvantages as well. Very much like its big brother, you have a single process emulation, which can be both a curse and a blessing. There is a bit of setup needed, but it's quite fast to generate traces in. So the question we'll have to ask ourselves this time again is, do we use the big or a small elephant? So today, what we're going to have a look at is this CVE from 2019, published by Google Security Research. It is a Microsoft Windows kernel out of bounds read from a malformed PE. It is both on Windows 8.1 and 10, and it happens when the file, the malformed PE, is displayed in the File Explorer, or you click on it, or when you interact with it. And the research team was kind enough to provide us with a proof of concept triggering the bug. So what does it mean, this bug? We have a blue screen of death, not happy Windows crashing, and we want to understand why. For that, we have to choose between the big and the small elephant. And that choice is quite fast this time because we need kernel. We have to go with the bigger brother, the big elephant. With the esReverse, there's not much setup needed when it comes to the big elephants. It means we already provide with a full system emulation for Windows. We have from our dear friends at Google, PE that triggers the crash. And we also have in esReverse the means to do time travel analysis on a Windows full system emulation. So it's quite fast. I will show you in a couple of slides what it looks like. Essentially, you import a QEMU VM for your Windows machine. You will create a live snapshot of the booted VM just before the crash happens. You will create a scenario, which essentially is a debugging session, if you wish, in a more traditional way. Start your booted VM. You add your vulnerable PE, or rather the PE triggering the vulnerability. And then you have to record it. We have three ways of recording a scenario in esReverse. The first one is manual. That means you click on start recording, you do whatever you want in your VM, then you click on stop recording, and you have a time travel trace of everything that happened in between these two clicks. Quite simple, but it's kind of hard to time when you want to start recording and etc. And it can generate bigger traces. There's another one. That's the binary, which allows you to bound the record to a certain binary inside of that machine. That's only for Windows 10, but essentially, should you want to execute one binary inside of a virtual machine and record what happens in that time, then you could do it this way. Also, quite nice, we've implemented ASM stub. Using special instructions, you could trigger the start of the recording and the stop of the recording that would allow you to be precise to the instruction what you want to record if you have control over, for example, your own binary. We have other means to record, but these are the three main ones, essentially. So we have to choose our recording mode. For us, unfortunately, nothing fancy today. We'll have to click on start and on stop. Why? Because the bug is not triggered by a binary running. It's Windows itself passing the binary that triggers the bug. So we have to do it manually this time. What does it look like? I will show you in this video. Essentially, here you have on the left our, like we said, scenario. We will click on start record. This is the Windows machine that has the vulnerable P inside. And I will just advance because it's long. We will click on start record, trigger the bug, and then stop record. So the record has started and the bug will trigger. It will, well, Windows will crash and then we can stop the record. So I did not do it live because we have to replay the recording afterwards, and I'm going to do some live demo with you on that exact trace. But yeah, essentially, we can't really do it live, the recording of that. So, tada, magic of videos. Now I have my time travel trace. So right before we dive into analyzing what happened in that Windows crash, I kind of need to present to you what's inside of that time travel trace and show you what we have at eChart for the GUI of time travel analysis. So in the middle, the main element, I would say, is the code that has been executed every single instruction in the top-bottom fashion. And so you can click on the instruction that's interesting to you, and all the panels on the side will synchronize with that moment in time. That's what we call transition. And bound to a transition is what we call context. Well, we have two contexts, context before and context after, which means that is before the execution of the instruction and after the execution of the instruction. On the left-hand side, you have the call tree, which is quite handy to try and understand what's going on around you in terms of system calls, in terms of function calls, sorry. And the little red line denotes where you are in the timeline. On the right-hand side, you have the CPU view, which shows you the CPU state, every single registers. And you can see also highlighted in yellow, those that are changed by the instruction that you are on, by that transition. You have a memory view that allows you to see the state of memory at that particular moment in time. You can also track this particular memory address through the entire time travel trace to understand when was this particular memory region read and when was something written to that particular memory region. Last but not least, at least for this small presentation, there is the search view, which allows you to search for different symbols or function calls, addresses calls, and so on. Now that we have done that little tour of esReverse, let's dive into the use case of the day and start at the end of our time travel trace, which is a blue screen of death, the nasty kind. Essentially, now we want to try and find a starting point. For those of you who like Windows, they might know about this function, this keyBuckCheck, which is a function called when there is a blue screen of death. So what we will do is we will try and leverage time travel analysis and search in the trace if there is a keyBuckCheck. There is one. We can click on next, and we will directly jump in the timeline at the moment there is a keyBuckCheck called. From there, what we can do is inspect the backtrace to understand what happened. And as you can see, we are on a keyBuckCheck. which was called subsequently from a page fault itself from a mem copy. So this is a good starting point, right? We can jump at that mem copy moment in time and try to understand what happened. So if we jump first to that page fault, we can see the page fault happened while executing this instruction. So we are likely either writing to an unmapped mem or not writing to an unmapped memory region. Here we are reading from an unmapped memory region. We want to understand what's in that region, where it comes from, and so on. So we go to the moment of right before calling memcopy. So at the moment at the call, what can we do is we can inspect at that moment in time what's in the memory and what are the registers to try and understand what's going on. But first, in memcopy, let us do a quick rewinding on what is memcopy. We copy bytes from one buffer to another, and it takes three arguments: the destination, the source, and the number of bytes to be copied. So following the Windows 64-bit calling convention, the first argument is stored in RCX, the second in RDX, and the third in R8. So that means at that moment in time, in RCX, RDX are the different addresses of the buffers, and R8 denotes the size that we want to copy. What's inside of these different arguments? So from the source on RDX, we see that we are constructing it from a stack address. We're taking a buffer, then we're adding onto it on the add. We're adding from an offset that's itself stored on the stack, and the size is also taken from the stack. So crash comes from a memory copy that has three arguments. For the sake of time, I will only investigate the source being wrong in the mem copy and also cheating because I know that it is the cause of the crash, kind of. We can still have three different problems here. Source buffer leads directly to unmapped memory. We could also have the offset added onto that buffer leading to unmapped memory, or the size of the copy might be too big. So if you have a look at the source of the buffer before adding on the offsets, we don't end up in unmapped memory. So the buffer is not incorrect. The size of the copy could be too big. However, it's very unlikely because, as you can see from this assembly here, we have our call, and then only 7 instructions later, we have our page fault. So very unlikely it's the size that's too big because it's probably during the first copying the first bit that we have a problem. So we have that weird offset. And roughly after a page from the original buffer source, we have unmapped memory, which kind of means we have a problem here. Let's try and understand what's going on. So the offset we take is OXE7FF, and it's taken from this memory address. What we can do is we can leverage the history of selection on esReverse to try and understand when was this offset written in memory, double click on it, and we end up at this instruction. Then what we want to know is we are taking this from RDX. How was constructed RDX? So we can have a look at the last time RDX was modified, and we will jump to this instruction. And we can have a look at the history of access to this memory region, and we'll jump to this instruction. And sequentially, essentially, we jump back in time to end up to this memory region, and we have to jump quite a few times. I just skipped through because there's an easier way to do it. I'll show after. Eventually, we end up in this memory region. That's responsible for the crash. As we can see, E7FF, the memory is not moved. And as you can see, here we are inside of a PE, so it's very likely the PE header that's responsible. Well, not very likely, we know it because the Google research team has said it, but essentially we have found the culprit, which is this byte. What a journey, right? It was quite long. We had to jump from a memory region, then have a look at the register, and etc. Let's try and see if we can make our lives easier. through data taint analysis. Essentially, what we will do now is leverage that tool to streamline that process. So let's do a taint analysis. So we'll take the memory address at which there is the offset that's interesting to us and taint backwards until the beginning of time to try and see how this memory was constructed. So this is the data taint analysis. We go to the last time there was a dependency added onto the taint analysis, and we already end up in the same memory region here, which is, if we double click here, we end up at that moment in time, which was the same, with the same PE header and the same offset was already done. So this is how we can streamline the process. This is an introduction on data taint analysis because I'll use it live, and that will allow us to understand more about this crash. So we can either use the different history of access selection endlessly until we find a culprit, or use the data taint analysis. So what we will do in the next few minutes is use that data taint analysis. But we will not just redo the analysis. We want to understand more about this crash. So we know there's an offset that's causing a crash, but if you've programmed before, usually it's checked against the size of some sort. Is that size hard-coded? Are there any conditions that lead to this bug? Do we control these conditions? These are very important exploitability criteria. It turns out we don't have a weaponized version of this CVE, but it's still an interesting topic to have a look at. So we will try and understand, are there any conditions that we need to meet to trigger the bug? Is it hard-coded? Do we have control over it? Oh, I need to go on to the time travel analysis now to do it live, and I hope the gods of demo are with me. So I will go to the moment in time where we have the KE bug check. We are here, we go to the memory copy. I'm just redoing the analysis that was on the slide, essentially, to end up at the right moment in time before we try and understand what's going on. So from now to the first, we taint, we go at the last time there was a memory copy, and we are in the PE header. So what we want to understand is, do we have any checks on this memory region? So what we can do is we can do another taint analysis, but this time we will taint it forward. What it does is it will have a look at whatever region is impacted by that offset. And if we taint, we will see it. And as a quick show, we can have a look at the symbols. And if we scroll down, we end up in that memory copy and that page fault and so on. So this is the right offset. We're still at the right place. As we can see, there's still a bunch of operations done before that. And what's interesting is we can see in the taint analysis when there's flags that are touched on the CPU. So we'll have a look at these and see if there's any interesting comparisons. So the first one is a comparison against 0. Didn't learn much here. What we know is that we can't have this offset being 0. Okay, can move on. Another comparison. Okay, another comparison against 0. Nice. So we can move to the next one. This time we're comparing 2 registers, which is interesting. We can understand what is this register. It's essentially our buffer, and we want to know we have this ECX that's compared against. So we want to know what is the ECX. Is it hard-coded? As we can see, it's the result of some shift operation that's itself taken from some memory region and so on. We can go back manually in time to understand what's going on with this ECX, how it was constructed. But I think what we could do is rather do a taint analysis on ECX from that moment until the beginning. This time we do it backwards again in time. Why? Because we want to understand what's going on and how is it constructed. So we know that ECX here is OXF000. We'll taint it in time and go to the last time there is a new element added onto that taint. We go at that moment in time. AAX is constructed from a memory segment, which is E03F. And we end up again in the PE header. So we have two elements, one here and one here, 2 bytes that are responsible for that crash. And we could go again back to the analysis. Spoiler, there are 4 bytes involved in that crash in the PE header file, which are all described lengthily in blog post on eShard's website that you can have a look at. But the main concept here was to show how to leverage that taint analysis to understand a crash in the Windows kernel. As you may have noticed, it does not matter here. We did not even check what functions are called to understand the crash. We just had a look at the data itself. Very little code involved. The symbols do not even matter in the taint analysis. This is kind of the power of time travel analysis, which is you can focus not only on code, but also on data and how the data moves through time and so on. Essentially, if you're more interested in the bug itself, you can have a look at the blog post, but the idea here was to show you how to leverage taint analysis to understand what's going on. And this is all done actually in the kernel, so it's quite useful because there's no other taint, or less taint analysis, but even time travel analysis on kernel. So what did we learn? So yes, there are conditions that lead to this bug. We can't just put whatever we want in that offset. Is it hard-coded? It's not hard-coded. We somehow have control over at least one of these offsets on which there are some comparisons that lead to the blue screen of death. So that is kind of all for today. I don't know if you have any questions for me. If so, please leave them in the chat and I'll try my best to answer them.